Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in and being a part of the conversation as we talk about the Second Amendment, firearms policy in movies, culture, education, politics, courts, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. Also, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also like our follow us on Facebook. That way you can get the alerts whenever we go live. Also, once again, constant reminder, please go to fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. Tons of cool t-shirts. It's a way for you to support the Second Amendment and our fight for the Second Amendment and look good doing it. Every penny you spend there goes right back into the fight for our constitutional right to keep and bear arms. That's fpcgear.com. All right, today's going to be a little bit of a different format. There's something I wanted to talk about because there's big things right now that seem to be happening when it comes to the right to bear arms. Seems to be a lot of news out there lately about various different situations as well as court rulings. And so with that, I kind of wanted to just throw out there just kind of a conversation, because we always talk about our rights, right? We talk about our right to bear arms. We talk about our right to keep and bear arms. But we don't often talk about our responsibility to, when it comes to keeping and bearing arms. And so I just wanted to throw something out there. And I really kind of felt like it's necessary. And I realized, 90 to 95 to 99% of y'all out there who are paying attention, who are watching this stuff, who are following this stuff, you know what? We are responsible gun owners. We know and understand the importance and the responsibility that we take on when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms. We know and we understand all of that. But unfortunately, there's a small percentage of folks, just a small percentage of folks out there who from time to time, don't fully know or understand that. And here's the reason why it's important. You take, for example, the ruling that just took place in the Ninth Circuit, which, by the way, tomorrow we're going to have we're going to be talking a little bit more about that and exactly what that means, what the ruling on open carry means in the Ninth Circuit. We'll be talking with Joshua Prince about that of the Prince Law Group. But I wanted to once again get into this idea that if open carry, if first of all, understanding that. One of the big things that we're debating right here is, do we actually have a right to bear arms? The Peruta decision when it came out wasn't about whether or not concealed carry should be whether or not there was a right to conceal carry, even though that's what the Ninth Circuit ruled on. Even in this particular case, the Young case, it's not about whether or not you have a right to open carry. That's probably what they're going to wind up with the Ninth Circuit. If it does go on, it's probably what they're going to wind up ruling on. The question is whether or not we actually have a right to bear arms, to possess a functioning firearm, to have a firearm in our possession for the purpose of self-defense outside of the home. Heller and McDonald already settled the issue of the right to keep arms inside the home. But now we're talking about the right to bear arms outside of the home. And so with that, so there's that whole part of the conversation when it comes to the right. But then there's also like the responsibility. And we've seen a couple of incidents recently in particular in the newspaper or in the news with concealed carry permit holders. A gentleman, I believe it was in Portland, who wound up getting shot because he was in the middle of an argument with a couple of guys. His firearm fell out of his holster. He reached down to pick it up and wound up getting shot by law enforcement. Then there was the individual in Clearwater, Florida, who got into an altercation over a parking spot, got shoved to the ground, and then drew his firearm and wound up shooting the person who shoved him, stating that he was felt like he was in fear of his life and his safety. Now, I'm not trying to judge or really get into the details of either one of those of either one of those situations, but to talk about some of the responsibilities that we have if we're going to decide. Not so much, I'm not going to get into in the home, but if you're going to decide to carry a firearm, if you're going to decide to have a firearm, whether it's open carry or concealed carry in public, to understand that I fundamentally believe we don't just have a right, we do have a right to bear arms, but we also have a responsibility. When we choose to bear arms, we have a responsibility. And that responsibility has to do with making sure that we are creating the safest situation or environment possible. You know, whenever we encounter, for example, when we encounter law enforcement, you know, at least here in California, we have a requirement that if we have a concealed carry permit, if we're carrying, we have a responsibility to notify law enforcement. If we encounter law enforcement, we have a responsibility to notify them. That we are in fact carrying or that we have a concealed carry permit. And also, by the way, to follow the direction that they provide to us. You know, with that, once again, I think that part of that is, now that's mandated by law, but I think part of that is an identification of our responsibility to make sure that we are creating, once again, the safest environment possible. If this individual, if law enforcement knows that we're carrying a firearm, you know, one, it helps give them information to help make the situation safer. But also with that, we have a responsibility to make sure that however we do it, however we notify them, we do it in a way in which creates a de-escalation. So, for example, you know, I was always told, and I was taught this growing up, not just before when I had concealed carry, but when I was taught that, hey, you know, if you get pulled over by a police officer, you keep your hands on the steering wheel, you keep your ID and your license, you keep it someplace out so you don't have to reach into anything or reach anywhere. I was taught you stay in the car, you keep your hands once again visible, and you follow the directions of the police officer. You know, that's what I was taught. And you only do what what the cop tells you to do. I mean, me personally, I have as a practice, when I get into my car, I take my wallet with my ID and my concealed carry permit, and I put it out here on, you know, someplace where I can reach it. I have my insurance and my registration someplace, once again, where I'm not reaching into a glove box or into a center console or anything to have to show it to them. So if I would happen to get pulled over, hands on the steering wheel, they ask me, I give them my license, my registration, I give them my concealed carry permit, and so that way they know. I have now notified them that I'm a concealed carry permit holder. I get asked the question, I see you're a concealed carry permit holder. Are you currently armed? I tell them yes, and I tell them where it is, and I keep my hands on the steering wheel. Once again, this is not about me. It's not about, you know, oh, well, I'm giving away my rights and this, that, and the other, and I need to stand up. No, this is about me making sure that this is safe, both for him and for me, right? I have a responsibility to do that because I have chosen to carry a firearm. And the reason why I have that responsibility is because I know that if things go bad, the worst case scenario is someone is going to lose their life. And I know that's the worst case scenario. So I have a responsibility to make sure that I am doing whatever I can to de-escalate that situation. Same thing when I'm dealing with the average person. You know, the incident with the guy in Clearwater, Florida. I don't know all of the details, right? But I know this. I know that I have a responsibility to make sure that I am not looking for opportunities to have a confrontation. I am, in fact, if there are ever times when there's going to be a potential confrontation, I have a responsibility to try and de-escalate. Why? Because I am concealed carrying in particular, I know that once again, the potential downside to this particular scenario is someone could wind up losing their life. And so I have a responsibility. I had an incident one time with a guy. I was loaning someone some of my equipment. They had pulled their car next to mine. We were unloading. A guy was pulling out, and he almost hit my friend's car, right? And so he almost hit the car. And so my buddy just kind of, hit his trunk with his hand to kind of alert him, hey, you almost hit the car, because he's trying to keep the guy from running into his car and, creating damage to both vehicles. Well, needless to say, two young guys get out of the car, both of them angry. Man, why are you banging on my car? And my friend is like, he's upset and angry. He's trying to tell the guy he's trying to back in. He was almost backed into his car, and he was ready to go to blows, as were they. Well, my attitude was, I'm like, whoa, guy, hey, let's all calm down. This is what was going on. He was just trying to, yada, yada, yada. And even though these young cats were still trying to be all angry and upset, once again, I realized that my responsibility in this is to de-escalate. Because once again, I know that in the end, the worst case scenario is a lot worse than if I weren't armed. So, and once again, I'm saying that to say we have a responsibility, right? We have a responsibility to make sure that when we carry, we do so safely. We have a responsibility to make sure that we are properly trained, that we know and understand things like that we know and we understand when is it appropriate to use deadly force. And I specifically mean that, not just use force, but use deadly force. Because when you draw your firearm, that is deadly force. When you decide you are going to draw your firearm, I'm assuming it's because you intend to shoot. And if you intend to shoot, that's deadly force. And so it's important that you do the sort of training that is necessary to make sure that you know and understand when is it appropriate, when is it not appropriate, how to judge those situations, how to de-escalate situations. Those are the sorts of things that we all, if you're going to carry a firearm in public, that you need to do. That is part of your responsibility. Part of our responsibility as we choose to carry firearms and exercise our right to bear arms. We have a responsibility to know the law in our various jurisdictions. Like, a lot of people don't even know that in the state of California, there is no duty to retreat. Now, California is not a stand your ground state, right? Stand your ground meaning that if they determine that you were acting in self-defense, you're not required to retreat. Therefore, in some cases, like in the Clearwater, Florida case, the sheriff opted not to charge that individual. Rather, in the state of California, it's part of the jury instructions. In the jury instructions, they note that you are not required to retreat. If something like that happens and you are charged and you go to trial, that is one of the items that's included in the jury instructions. Well, it's important to know that. It's important to know that, once again, as a gun owner, as someone who is in particular, someone has a concealed carry permit who's going to be carrying in public. It's important to know that, to know the law. Folks, I once again, and I realize that I'm probably, with most of you, I'm preaching to the choir. And I really do hope that you guys really do understand it, and that we all kind of take it and understand that, we have a once again, we have a responsibility. It's not just about a right. The guy who dropped his firearm, that was a very unfortunate situation. But to me, what that signaled to me was the responsibility that I have to make sure that all of my equipment is safe and in good working condition and is properly affixed. Because once that firearm is out, and I really believe that it was just a natural reaction. Oh, there's a firearm on the ground. I need to make sure I secure it. And I'm not judging. I'm not saying law enforcement overreacted or underreacted or probably. I'm not saying either one. All I'm saying is that if the individual had a holster, had his firearm better, can I say better holstered? Can I say maybe he had a more secure holster? I don't know, but all I'm saying is that had that been the case, had he not, because if you look at some of the videos before, he was out at a sports bar, he was eating and drinking. Had he maybe, I don't know if he was going to be eating or drinking or hanging out with guys who are eating or drinking. Maybe if he had put the firearm, I usually, when I go out drinking, If I'm concealed carrying, I disarm myself because I know that judgment gets impaired when you consume alcohol. That's me. That's part of my responsibility is. But all of these things, if nothing else, without getting into any specifics, I'm just throwing those out as examples. We have a responsibility to have as a mindset to be responsible. Just like we don't want the government telling us how we have to store our firearms, right? But we know as responsible gun owners, we know that there's certain ways in which, and situations in which we need to make sure that we store our firearms and that we store them appropriately, right? Right. So the same thing, that same sense of responsibility has to be in our heads when we go out into the public as we carry, whether it's open carry, whether it's concealed carry. Because ultimately, it is the rare incidences of irresponsibility or perceived irresponsibility that the anti-gunners wind up using as examples, as anecdotal examples in which to restrict our rights or infringe upon our rights. So we have a responsibility to the public at large, to our fellow gun owners, and to ourselves to make sure that we understand that as much we have to be as passionate as we are about the right to keep and bear arms, we need to be equally as passionate about the responsibility, the individual self-responsibility to keep and bear arms. That is the fundamental way, the best way we have of keeping the government, of honing off and fighting off the infringement that those in the government believe, where the government needs to be responsible and tell us how we need to exercise our right to keep and bear arms. I'm not down for that. I believe in self-governance. Not the governance of the government, not the government, a bunch of people who don't like guns, who don't know anything about guns, telling me how I need to be as a gun owner. But self-governance. And it is that self-governance as demonstrated through individuals and promoted by us, one to another, one gun owner to another, promoting that self-governance and that self-responsibility. That is what creates an environment that allows us to stave off overregulation and infringements of our rights as those who would seek to infringe on those rights would seek to do. Anyway, folks, thank you for letting me, get on my soapbox and preach a little bit today. I appreciate all that you guys do, and I know, like I said, I know I'm preaching to the choir. But here's the thing, folks. Sometimes preaching to the choir is the best way to get them to sing. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for liking and sharing this video feed and telling everybody about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.